Christmas morning had always carried a sense of magic in our house, with the warm glow of fairy lights reflecting off the polished ornaments and the scent of cinnamon and pine filling every corner. I woke up before anyone else, heart pounding with the anticipation of presents and family laughter, the kind of hope that makes you believe anything is possible for just a few hours. As I tiptoed into the living room, the tree sparkled more brightly than ever, and wrapped boxes in every shape and size created a colorful landscape at its base. My parents were there, smiling, their eyes soft and joyful, and for a moment, I let myself be carried by the beauty of it all. Then they handed my sister a shiny gift, along with a small, ornate key, and I froze. The excitement in me faltered as my gaze shifted to the box's glimmer, a pang of unease creeping into my chest. I smiled, forcing cheerfulness, but inside a whisper of confusion tugged at me. Why her? Why this? My mind raced, comparing this moment to every other Christmas, every overlooked wish, every settled disappointment that had quietly piled up over the years. I wanted to feel happiness, but the air felt suddenly heavier, the contrast impossible to ignore. Even as I clapped politely and shared in the congratulations, my thoughts kept circling the unfairness, and a sharp edge of envy began to settle beneath the surface, coloring the morning with tension I couldn't shake. I watched as my sister's fingers trembled with excitement while she carefully lifted the lid of her present, and my stomach sank before I even saw what was inside. It wasn't just any gift. Nestled in glossy wrapping, accompanied by the small ornate key from earlier, was a lease agreement for a brand new, fully furnished downtown apartment and address I had dreamed of having for years, but never could afford. The weight of it hit me all at once, a mix of disbelief and quiet humiliation. My parents beamed proudly, their eyes gleaming as they looked between us, and I forced a smile, nodding along, though my hands were tight fists in my lap. We thought it was time she had something special, my mother said softly, her tone full of pride. She's worked hard, and she deserves a little luxury, my father added. It's her first real step into adulthood, something we know you've been struggling toward too. But we thought this was her moment. Their words were meant to be encouraging, but to me, they landed like stones. I thought of the sacrifices I had quietly made over the years, the late nights, the unpaid overtime, the personal dreams set aside for the sake of family. And yet here was this glaring disparity, undeniable and public. I clenched my jaw, swallowing the tight knot of resentment forming in my throat. No one noticed, or if they did, they didn't comment, and that silent acknowledgement hurt worse than anything spoken. The room felt smaller suddenly, my chest tight, as I realized that for all my efforts, I was invisible in my own family's eyes. I wanted to speak, to protest, to make them see, but every word seemed trapped behind a veil of etiquette and the fragile cheer of the morning. So I sat there, letting the applause for my sister wash over me, a quiet storm of envy and shame building in silence. I tried to join in the conversation, asking about my sister's new apartment, but my words felt hollow. A thin layer of cheer stretched over the growing ache inside me. My parents chatted animatedly with her, their laughter light and approving, while I nodded along, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Every compliment they offered her felt like a mirror reflecting my own absence. The countless times my accomplishments had gone unnoticed or been quietly dismissed. My mind drifted to past Christmases when my carefully chosen gifts had been met with polite nods, while my sister's smallest gestures were celebrated with fanfare. I remembered the time I had stayed up all night baking cookies for a school fundraiser, only to hear my parents remark how she did so much more with half the effort. Even simple victories, like winning a small award or landing a minor promotion, had been brushed aside or compared to hers, leaving me perpetually second best. The FOMO gnawed at me quietly, a constant reminder that I was always the one overlooked, underestimated, or replaced. Watching them beam over her success, I felt a slow burn of moral outrage, the realization of favoritism cutting deeper with each passing moment. My heart wanted to protest, to demand recognition, but social etiquette and fear of conflict silenced me. So I stayed, observing every smile, every approving glance, each one a sting that confirmed the patterns I had silently endured for years, wondering when or if the scales would ever tip in my favor. The moment felt like a slow unraveling, as my relatives and family friends circled around my sister, showering her with compliments and laughter. A sharp pang of invisibility pierced through me. Every word of praise, every admiring glance, seemed directed solely at her, leaving me standing in the shadows, unnoticed and unremarkable. I felt my chest tighten, a mix of frustration and resignation bubbling beneath the surface. I remembered the countless times I had gone out of my way to help, to be responsible, to sacrifice my own unhappiness for the family. And yet here she was, effortlessly absorbing attention and accolades that had never been mine. My mind replayed old memories like a cruel highlight reel. The science fair project no one commented on, the school play I had devoted weeks to, the subtle jabs disguised as advice from my parents that left me questioning my worth. Even my closest friends, who were meant to support me, seemed to focus there on her, reinforcing the silent hierarchy I had long sensed. I couldn't help the quiet resentment that flared inside me, the sense that no matter how hard I tried, I would always be on the sidelines of recognition. Every laugh and cheer for her only deep and the sense of exclusion. And yet, amid the loneliness, a strange determination began to form. I felt the simmering heat of frustration and the first sparks of resolve, a seed that whispered I wouldn't remain invisible forever. As the day wore on, I found myself watching my sister with a mix of disbelief and quiet calculation. She moved through the room with effortless charm, laughing at every compliment, basking in the glow of approval that had always been reserved for her. Every exaggerated smile, every flippant remark about her luck and privileges dug into me, stirring a controlled fire that I could no longer ignore. I began to map out the contours of my own response, small, careful moves that could shift the balance without drawing suspicion. My mind raced with possibilities, ways to prove my worth, subtle reminders of my competence, opportunities where her arrogance could backfire. I recalled every time my contributions had been minimized, every moment she had been celebrated for mediocrity, and I felt a grim satisfaction imagining the tables turned. It wasn't about cruelty, it was about dignity, about reclaiming a sense of self that had long been overshadowed. Even as I smiled politely at her boasts, a quiet plotting began to take shape, hints of power reversal threading through my thoughts. The more I observed her, the more determined I became. This holiday, this year, would mark the beginning of a shift, one calculated move at a time, a slow but certain reclamation of respect that had always been denied to me. It happened during lunch, the room buzzing with chatter and clinking silverware, when my sister, unable to resist, decided to parade her new apartment and the luxurious key like a trophy. She leaned back in her chair, casually dropping hints about the location, the modern furniture, the amazing view, all while laughing as if the world should marvel at her fortune. My stomach churned with a mix of embarrassment and anger, especially as our cousins and aunts and uncles nodded eagerly, hanging on every word. I tried to smile, tried to participate in the conversation, but each comment she made felt like a dagger pointed at my chest. One cousin, clearly impressed, asked if I had considered living independently, and the words hit like a slap. I fumbled for an answer, feeling suddenly small and exposed. My parents exchanged glances, proud and oblivious to my discomfort, reinforcing the invisible hierarchy I had lived under for years. The laughter around her only magnified my humiliation, each joke an approving nod cementing my role as the overlooked sibling. Even as my cheeks flushed and I sank lower into my seat, a flicker of resolve sparked inside me. This moment, the sting of public shame, ignited something deeper than mere resentment. It was the first real taste of motivation, the realization that I couldn't remain passive while she flaunted privileges I had earned nothing less to deserve. The audience can feel the tension, the simmering anger and shame, setting the stage for the calculated moves that would soon follow. Later that evening, after the house had quieted and the holiday cheer faded into shadows, I found myself alone in the living room, staring at the tree and replaying the day in my mind. That's when Sarah, my oldest friend, and the one person who had always believed in me, called. Her voice carried warmth, but also an edge of determination that stirred something inside me. She reminded me of my strengths, the countless times I had quietly worked harder than anyone else, the sacrifices no one noticed, and the potential I had been overlooking in myself. As we spoke, memories surfaced, moments of subtle humiliation, of favoritism so blatant it hurt, of dreams deferred so others could shine. Yet, intertwined with those flashbacks was clarity. I wasn't powerless. There were opportunities, doors I had been too afraid or too polite to open, and now I saw them for what they were, tools to reclaim dignity and respect. By the time our call ended, I felt a flicker of hope mixed with determination. For the first time in years, the unfairness of my family's treatment didn't feel permanent. Instead, it became fuel, a reason to plan strategically, to move deliberately, to turn every slight and ignored effort into a calculated step toward justice. The audience begins to root for me here, feeling the tension shift from pain to empowerment. Knowing that change is coming and that the scales might finally tip, I began to observe carefully, noticing the little cracks in my sister's confident exterior that no one else seemed to see. Her charm was effortless, but it was shallow, and beneath it, she relied on our parents' approval to bolster her sense of superiority. I started planting seeds subtly, small acts designed to highlight her arrogance without ever confronting her directly. I complimented her successes in public while subtly questioning details that exposed overconfidence or mistakes. At family gatherings, I made casual remarks about financial responsibility, career growth, and independence, drawing attention to areas where she had been unprepared or uninformed. Each carefully worded comment, each seemingly offhand observation, was a calculated move to shift perception without overt aggression. Internally, I felt a thrilling sense of cleverness, like a player on the chessboard maneuvering pieces while everyone else was distracted. I began sharing snippets of my own achievements and plans in conversations, letting them reach the right ears without seeming boastful. So the contrast between her superficial accomplishments and my quiet competence became undeniable. Every interaction, every subtle display of intellect, experience, and foresight felt like a small victory, a karmic foreshadowing of the moment when the balance would tip completely. I reveled in the empowerment of strategy, the knowledge that I could reclaim the respect and attention I had long been denied. Each day, the tension between us intensified, but I remained calm, confident that the payoff would be explosive and that the world would finally recognize the worth I had quietly cultivated all these years. Not to happen during a family brunch, the kind where relatives linger over mimosas and small talk. When the first opportunity for real justice presented itself, my sister, eager to flaunt her apartment and newfound independence, launched into a long-winded story about hosting a holiday gathering in her new place. She described the decor, the food, the exclusive guest list, all with exaggerated pride. As she spoke, I noticed the little inconsistencies in her tale, details that didn't add up, mistakes she tried to gloss over. A cousin, politely curious, asked a pointed question about the venue, and she faltered, stammering, struggling to keep her story coherent. Her embarrassment was subtle but unmistakable, a flush creeping across her cheeks. The laughter of the family tinged with mild disbelief. I sat quietly, my fingers entwined, watching every misstep with a private, satisfied grin. It wasn't cruelty, it was acknowledgement of reality. The first small recognition that her effortless charm didn't make her flawless. I thought of all the times I had been overshadowed, dismissed, or ignored, and a surge of vindication coursed through me. In that moment, I felt the scales shift slightly. A tiny victory that was entirely mine to savor. The audience can feel it too. The delicious tension of anticipation combined with the subtle moral justice finally unfolding, and the sense that bigger payoffs are just around the corner. I could feel the shift in the room as my parents exchanged uneasy glances, their usual certainty shaken by the subtle unraveling of my sister's carefully crafted image. My mother's lips pressed together, and my father's eyebrows whereupon, in a way I had rarely seen, an unspoken acknowledgement that things weren't exactly as they'd believed. I felt a strange mix of emotions, a tug-of-war between guilt for silently taking pleasure in her embarrassment and the undeniable thrill of vindication. Memories flashed unbidden. Childhood birthdays when my achievements were shrugged off. The small but painful moments when my efforts had been minimized in favor of her accomplishments. The quiet loneliness that had defined so much of my youth. Every flashback strengthened my resolve, reminding me why I had begun this path, why I needed to reclaim what had always been mine. I sat quietly, feeling the tension thrum in the air, aware that my parents' unease was only the beginning. The undercurrent of disappointment and confusion was intoxicating, proof that the dynamics I had endured for years were finally beginning to shift. I allowed myself a brief, private smile, knowing that the stage was set for the bigger moments to come, the moves that would ultimately lead to a full reckoning weeks later. The opportunity I had been waiting for finally arrived, and I executed it with deliberate care. My sister had invited the extended family and a few of her friends to a celebratory gathering at her apartment, eager to showcase her supposed success. I arrived unannounced, dressed simply but impeccably, carrying nothing more than my presence and a quiet confidence that immediately shifted the energy in the room. As introductions were made, I casually mentioned a recent promotion at work, a position that came with responsibilities, influence, and a substantial salary increase, one that my parents had never expected me to attain. The subtle implication didn't go unnoticed. My sister's eyes flickered with surprise, and the room shifted, the chatter pausing as everyone processed the revelation. Then I dropped the next detail. An investment I had made months earlier had yielded unexpected returns, giving me financial freedom far beyond what she had just received. The laughter that had once surrounded her now wavered, curiosity and incredulity mixing with admiration. She opened her mouth to respond, but her words faltered, unsure how to regain control. I let the silence linger, allowing the contrast between her superficial gift and my carefully earned achievements to settle fully in the room. My parents' expressions morphed from pride to shock, as the hierarchy they had taken for granted was subtly, undeniably overturned. I could feel the quiet satisfaction of the moment building inside me, a delicious mix of empowerment and moral justice. For the first time, I was the center of attention, not for luck, not for favoritism, but for the effort, strategy, and resilience I had cultivated silently all these years. Each gaze that landed on me, each whispered question or glance of disbelief, reinforced the reversal. The room's energy had shifted irreversibly. The scales of recognition, long skewed, had finally tipped, and I stood poised, calm, and triumphant, savoring the dramatic twist that ensured no one would ever underestimate me again. The moment of reckoning came sooner than anyone expected. At a family gathering intended to celebrate my sister's success, her facade began to crumble. A casual question about the apartment's finances or topic she had boasted endlessly about exposed her lack of understanding and planning. As she fumbled through excuses, her usual charm faltered, replaced by awkward stammers and flushed cheeks. The extended family exchanged glances, subtle but unmistakable signals of doubt and disbelief, and I watched quietly, my heart pounding with a mix of satisfaction and lingering empathy. My parents' faces reflected shock and a dawning realization. For years, they had elevated her accomplishments while overlooking mine, but now the truth was undeniable. I recounted, with calm clarity and without malice, the steps I had taken to build my career, my investments, and my personal independence, highlighting the contrast between effort earned and privileges handed. Every word landed with precision, and the room seemed to shrink around her embarrassment. My sister's smile faded, her confidence shattered. As the applause and acknowledgement shifted entirely toward me, I felt a wave of emotional catharsis, a release of the tension, resentment, and frustration that had accumulated over decades. The audience, invested in my journey, experiences the peak of satisfaction as the skills of just as long ignored finally balance. In that charged silence, I saw my parents' eyes soften, reflecting not only pride, but regret and understanding. And I knew that my worth could no longer be dismissed. The room's energy had transformed, the hierarchy reversed, and for the first time, recognition and validation flowed my way, leaving me empowered, dignified, and finally seen. In the quiet aftermath of the confrontation, I found myself alone in my room, letting the events of the day settle around me. The victory had been sweet, but it was also reflective, a mixture of pride and a lingering awareness of my family's imperfections. I thought about the years of being overlooked, the small humiliations that had stacked into a weight I carried silently, and how each of those moments had shaped me. I realized that my resilience, patience, and strategic thinking were born from those very hardships, that the struggle had forged the person I had become. While my sister had faced public embarrassment, I felt no gloating satisfaction, only a calm recognition that the scales were finally balanced and that I had reclaimed the dignity that had been denied of. For so long, my parents, though flawed, had begun to see me in a new light, understanding my worth in ways they hadn't before. I allowed myself a deep, quiet smile, knowing I had navigated a treacherous path without losing integrity. The lessons were clear: perseverance, self-respect, and careful strategy could shift even the most entrenched dynamics. Though our family remained imperfect, I had found empowerment, recognition, and the emotional closure I had longed for, leaving me with a sense of bittersweet satisfaction and quiet triumph that would carry forward into every future challenge. The weeks that follow were quieter, but no less satisfying. I found myself moving through daily life with a newfound confidence, subtle but undeniable. Colleagues and friends noticed the shift in me, my poise, my calm authority, the way I no longer sought validation, but carried it effortlessly. Opportunities I had long hoped for began to materialize. A project at work that highlighted my leadership, invitations to events I had once been overlooked for, and small gestures of respect from relatives who had previously ignored me. Even my parents, still flawed in their ways, began to acknowledge my accomplishments without hesitation, their pride tempered by lessons learned the hard way. I could see my sister now, quieter, more cautious, the earlier arrogance replaced with careful consideration, and I sensed the subtle foreshadowing of a new family dynamic, one in which respect could no longer be assumed, and merit had its voice. Sitting in the quiet of my apartment one evening, I let myself fully absorb the moment, the sense of empowerment, the recognition I had longed for, and the satisfaction of having turned humiliation into triumph. It wasn't loud or ostentatious, but it was mine, earned and deliberate, a victory that whispered rather than shouted. And as I looked ahead, I knew that whatever challenges or conflicts came next, I had the resilience, strategy, and confidence to face them, leaving the audience with a sense of emotional closure, fulfillment, and hope that just as quiet, personal, and satisfying could always find its way.